The phone clicked dead in my ear, and for 3 full seconds I didn't move. My fingers were still curled around the receiver, my other hand frozen over the keyboard. The customer email on my screen glowed white against the blue background. The cursor blinking at the end of a half-typed sentence. I read it, but my eyes saw nothing except the smear of afternoon light across my cubicle wall, and my ears heard nothing except the echo of that flat, cold voice saying, "Hang yourself." I hung up the office phone and grabbed my cell from the desk drawer. The screen showed a call duration of 47 seconds. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then clicked into a generic voicemail greeting. I hung up and called again, same thing. My coworker Linda leaned over the partition. "You okay? You look like you saw a ghost." I didn't answer. I was already out of my chair, grabbing my purse, shoving my feet into the flats I kept under the desk. The parking lot was blindingly bright. That flat Florida 4 o'clock gray ray that bleaches everything white. I don't remember pulling out of the lot, or turning onto the highway. I remember the stoplight at Colonial and Orange. The way it seemed to take forever, and the sound of my own breathing, too fast, too shallow. The house looked the same as always when I pulled into the driveway. Yellow siding, the oak tree my father-in-law planted when he first bought the place, the rusty mailbox that needed replacing. But the front lawn was littered with small, bright pieces of color, pink, yellow, lavender, scattered across the grass like someone had emptied a laundry basket from the upstairs window. I parade crooked, left the engine running, and ran my daughter's clothes, her favorite lavender sundress, the one with the ruffle at the hem, her yellow t-shirt with the duck on the front, a pair of tiny socks, one white, one pink, lying in the dirt near the azalea bush, the little blue cardigan my mother had knitted before she passed, which I kept even though it was too small now, just for the memory of it. I bent down and picked up the sundress. The fabric was arm from the sun and gritty with sand. I pushed open the front door. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. No television, no music, no child's voice chattering to her dolls. The air smelled like coffee and cigarette smoke. Amrutha's combination, always. I walked through the living room. The coffee table was covered with papers. The kind of papers I'd seen before but never really looked at. Appraisal report, legal-sized forms with official stamps, a manila folder labeled, Estate of Robert Doyle. The kitchen was empty. A coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim. An ashtray on the counter held 2 butts, both with the same red lipstick. I went upstairs. My feet made the old wood creak in the same places they always did. 3rd step from the top. The loose boy ardne the bathroom door. The door to Emma Rutha's room was half open. I pushed it wider. The bed was made. The pale blue comforter smoothed flat. A suitcase stood open on the floor, half packed, a few blouses hanging over the edge. An olive, the heavy kind you use for clotheslines, was coiled on the nightstand. I stared at it for a long moment, my throat tightening. Where is she? The words came out of me, but I didn't recognize my own voice. It was thin and high and cut sharp at the edges. I went back down the stairs, and through the living room to the back porch. The screen door banged against the frame. The yard was, the old swing set still and quiet, the grass long and unwatered. I walked around the side of the house, where the driveway curved toward the detached garage, and there, on the garage floor, sitting on an old milk crate with her knees pulled up to her chest, was my daughter. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt. Her hair, which I had braided that morning, had come half undone, the rubber band hanging loose on one end. She wasn't wearing shoes. She was clutching her rabbit, the one with the worn-down the one she couldn't sleep without, against her chest. My voice broke. I knelt on the concrete in front of her, and she looked at me with those big gray eyes, and for a second I saw the blank, dazed look of a child who had gone too far into far and come back out the other side. Then her face crumpled, and she threw herself against me, arms around my neck, the bunny squashed between us. The word was wet against my shoulder. Mummy, I didn't want to. She said you said it was okay. She said you told her to put my things outside. I held her. I held her tight enough that I could feel her little ribs moving under her t-shirt, could feel her rot going fast. Who said that, baby? Who? That was her name for Memerita, the one she'd made up when she was 2 and couldn't pronounce the th. It had stuck, even though she could say it now. T said you called her. She said you were coming home late, and I had to go stay with Grandma. But Grandma's not here. She pulled back and looked at me, her eyes huge and wet. T said the house belongs to her. She said Daddy said so. She said you and Daddy didn't have enough money, so she had to live here now. She put my clothes on the grass. She said if I came inside I'd get in trouble. I wiped her face with the hem of my own shirt. That's not true, sweetheart. None of that is true. This is your home. It's always been your home. But she said, shh. I lifted her up. She was lighter than she should have been, and her little legs wrapped around my waist automatically. The way they'd done since she was a baby. Where's T now? I don't know. She went out the front door. She told me to stay in here until I run to listen better. She said you wouldn't want me anymore because I was bad. I carried her around the side of the house and back to the front door. My legs were shaking. The garage door was still open behind me, and I could see the empty milk crate and the spot where my daughter had sat alone in the dark for God knew how long. The living room was empty. No ma. I set Becca down on the couch and pulled out my phone. One new text message from Rotha's number. I opened it. She went running off. I couldn't stop her. Don't blame me for what the girl does on her own. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, and my hands started shaking. Becca tugged my sleeve. Mommy, T said the rope was for me. I turned to her. What rope? The one in her room. Becca's face was earnest, trying to explain something important. She showed me. She said if I ever told anybody she wasn't nice, she'd have to use it. She said it was a secret, but I'm telling you because she read me. She bit her lip. No, baby. You're not in trouble. I sat down beside her on the couch and pulled her into my lap. She let me hold her, but she was already looking at the television, reaching for the remote. Can I watch cartoons? I turned on the television for her. She settled against the pillows, the rabbit tucked under her chin, and I stood up and walked into the kitchen, where I braced my hands on the counter and tried to breathe. The clock on the microwave read, Daniel wouldn't be home for another hour. I pulled out my phone again and dialed his number. It rang and went to voicemail. I left a message, call me now. Then I went back to the living room. Becca was watching the screen, her face relaxed now, the crisis receding into the background the way small children do. Because the world is big and strange and you can't stay afraid forever. I looked at the papers on the coffee table again, the appraisal report, the official looking forms, and at the bottom of the stack, a single sheet of white paper, folded in half, with my husband's name written on the outside in Rotha's SHARP. Slanted hand I unfolded it. Dar Danny. I know you didn't want to do it this way, but I need you to understand. This was never about me. It was about Dad. He wanted me to have a place, and I'm taking it. If you and your wife want to stay, we can work something out, but I'm not leaving, not this time. Call me when you're ready to talk like adults. I read it twice. Then I slid it back into the stack of papers and sat down in the Aram chair, across from my daughter, and watched her watch her cartoon. The front door opened at 6:15. Daniel walked in, his briefcase in one hand, his keys in the other. He saw Becca on the couch, saw me in the Aram chair, saw the look on my face. What happened? He set the briefcase down. Ask your sister. My voice came out flat, almost. She threw Becca's clothes in the yard. She told her the house belonged to her. She locked her in the garage and told her I didn't want her anymore. And then she left. Daniel went very still. Eartha's not here. She left a note for you in the kitchen, on the coffee table. He picked up the folded paper and read it. His face went through a series of expressions I couldn't read. Confusion, then something like dread, then a slow settling into resignation. She called me at work, I said. Becca called me. She was crying, and I could hear our Martha in the background. She was ordering our daughter to hang herself. Daniel, I heard it with my own ears, and then the line went dead. He didn't answer. He walked over to the couch and sat down, but Becca didn't look at him. She was still watching the screen, her thumb in her mouth, the rabbit held tight. Becca, he said softly, come here, sweetheart. She didn't move. She kept staring at the Sierra. I got up and walked to the kitchen. The coffee mug with the lipstick stain was still in the sink. The ashtray still held its two butts. The back door was unlocked, and I locked it. Behind me I heard Daniel's voice, low and trying to be gentle. Becca, Daddy's asking you. Please, she finally spoke. T said you said it was okay. She said you told her to be the boss. The silence that followed was the worst kind of silence. The kind where you can feel a memory tilting on its axis, trying to decide which way to fall. I turned around and leaned against the counter. Daniel looked at me across the room, his hand still extended toward our daughter, who wouldn't take it. Daniel, I said. When did you tell your sister she could have this house? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His face was pale in the kitchen light. I didn't. She says you did. She has paid. She has a note on your father's letterhead. So if you didn't tell her, who did? He stood up. My father. Before he died he signed something. He wanted Marissa to have a place to stay. That's all. Just a place to stay. It was never supposed to be like this. I walked past him, back to the living room. Becca looked up at me, and I reached down and took her hand. Come on baby, let's go upstairs. But my show. It'll be there tomorrow. I led her up the stairs, past the third step that creaked, past the bathroom door with the loose board. At the top of the landing, I looked back. Daniel was standing at the bottom of the stairs, one hand on the banister, staring up at me. Where did she go? I asked him. I don't know. She's out there somewhere. She took a rope out of her room and left it on the nightstand. She told our daughter she'd use it if the girl told anyone she was mean. And you don't know where she is? Daniel said nothing. I opened the door to Becca's room and sat her on the bed, her little bed, with the pink comforter and the stuffed animals lined up along the wall. I sat down beside her and pulled the blanket over her legs. I'll be right back. Promise, promise. I closed the door behind me and went back down the stairs. Daniel was still at the bottom, still holding the banister. You're gonna call her, I said. You're going to call your sister. And you're going to tell her to come back here. And you're going to look her in the face and tell her she is never to touch our daughter again. He took out his phone and dialed. I watched his thumb hover over the screen. He put it to his AR. 1 ring, 2 rings. 3. It's going to voicemail. Leave a message. He did. His voice was tight, formal. The voice he used at work when he was angry, but trying not to show it. It's Daniel. Call me back immediately. We need to talk. He hung up and looked at me. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed, somewhere outside. Past its headlights sweeping across the living room window. I sat down on the couch and picked up the appraisal report. The numbers were high. Higher than I'd expected. I looked at the forms underneath it, the ones with all the official stamps and signatures. At the bottom of the last page, on a lime-haired witness, I saw a familiar name. I said slowly, "Who signed your father's will as a witness?" He stepped closer and looked at the paper. His face went blank. That's Mamarada's handwriting. I read the name again. It was Manara's writing. No question, the same sharp slant, the same elongated loop on the Y. She signed her own witness statement. I said, that's not legal. She can't be a witness to a document that gives her something. Daniel took the paper out of my hands and read at it. His jaw tightened, the muscle in his cheek working. She said Dad signed it in front of a lawyer. She said the lawyer witnessed it. She lied. He looked at me, and I watched the pieces click into place behind his eyes. The papers, the garage, the rope, the phone call, all of it, assembling itself into a shape he didn't want to see. I'm going to find her, he said. Call the police first. We don't need the police, Daniel. I stood up and took his arm. She told our child to hang herself. That's not a fight we handle inside the family. That's a crime. His eyes went to the stairs, where Becca's door was still shut. Fine, he sell them. I'll wait. I pulled out my phone and dialed. The operator answered on the second ring. What's your emergency? I opened my mouth to speak. The words were right there. My address, my name, the truth of what had happened. But I looked at the appraisal report in my hand, and at the note in Daniel's hand, and at the quiet upstairs where my daughter was hiding. Hold on, I said, and I hung up. I pressed end call and dropped the phone into my pocket. The operator's voice had been a thin line of order in a room that had none. But I wasn't ready to bring other people into this house yet. Not until I understood what I was looking at. Daniel's hand was still on the banister. His knuckles were white. Why did you hang up? Because I want to talk to you first. I held up the appraisal report, the witness line with Mayratha's unmistakable handwriting. Look at this again. She signed as a witness. That's not a mistake you make by accident. She forged it. Or she convinced your father to sign something he didn't understand. Your sister has been working on this for months. He didn't answer. He walked past me into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Read inside for a long moment, and closed it without taking anything. She was always the favorite, he said quietly. My father would have done anything for her, but he wasn't stupid. He wouldn't have left her the house outright. He knew we needed it. He knew Becca needed it. Then what did he sign? Daniel leaned against the counter and pressed the heels of his palms against his eyes. I don't know. He sent me a copy of something 6 months ago. A letter, not a legal document. He said he wanted Ratha to have a place to stay if she ever needed one. I said we could always let her use the guest room. That's the extent of what I agreed to. Did you tell her that? I told her. She said she understood. She moved in 3 weeks later and she's been here ever since. I set the papers back on the coffee table in a neat stack. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked its slow, heavy tick somewhere upstairs. I heard Becca's bedsprings creak. She was shifting position, maybe getting up. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and called up to her. Becca, stay in your room, sweet are. I'll be up in a minute. A small voice drifted down. Okay, mommy. Daniel came out of the kitchen and stood beside me. She's scared of me now. She wouldn't even look at me. She's scared of everyone. She spent an hour locked in a GA rage with your sister telling her that her parents don't want her. That's going to take longer than one conversation to fix. He flinched, but he didn't rug. He took out his phone again and held it up. I'm calling Arata again. Good. He dialed. This time, someone answered. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the tinny rasp of a voice on the other end. Daniel's face tightened. He walked away from me, toward the back door, and stepped out onto the porch, closing the screen behind him. I watched through the glass as he paced. His free hand cut the air in short, sharp gestures. He talked for 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. I sat on the couch and waited. The clock ticked. The television had gone dark. The screensaver bouncing a colored logo across the black. When he came back in, his face was gray. She's not coming back tonight. She says she has a friend in Tampa who'll let her stay. She said she'll come for her things tomorrow. Did you tell her about the witness signature? I did. What did she say? Daniel sat down in the Aram chair across from me. She said Dad signed it in front of the lawyer. She said the lawyer was too sick to come to the house. So she brought the papers to him, and he signed the witness line, because the lawyer couldn't. She said she has a video of Dad signing. A video. From a phone. She said she recorded it for her own records. I leaned forward. Show me. Tell her to send you the video. I asked. She said she can't send it because the file is too big. She said I'd have to come see it in Tampa. That's not how video files work. That's not how anything works. She's buying time. Daniel put his head in his hands. His shoulders were hunched, the shape of a man who had ride something too long and was only now realizing how heavy it was. I looked at the papers on the table again, at the witness line, at the date. I picked up my own phone and went into the living room corner, away from, and called my father-in-law's old lawyer. I'd never met the man, but his number was still in the book next to the kitchen phone. I dialed from memory. A woman answered. Glazer and Associates. My name is Charlotte Doyle. My father-in-law was Robert Doyle. I need to know if you handled his will. There was a pause. I'm sorry, we don't discuss client matters without authorization. I understand that. But I need to ask one question. Doyle sign any documents in the last year of his life that were witnessed by someone other than a member of your firm? Another pause. The woman said, hold please. I held. The music on the line was something classical. Violins, tinny through the phone speaker. I watched Daniel, still slumped in the Aram chair, not looking at me. A man's voice came on the line. This is David Glazer. Who's calling? I introduced myself. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I remember the case. Doyle came in with his daughter. She was very insistent that we draw up a codicil, an amendment to the existing will. I advised against it. But I'm not required to refuse a client's request. He signed in our office, with a member of my staff as witness. Only one witness. In Florida. That's sufficient. His daughter was present but she didn't sign anything. The witness was my paralegal, not a family member. I held the phone tighter. I have a document here with a different witness signature, a family member's name. I can't comment on documents I haven't seen, but I can tell you this. The only original codicil I drafted and witnessed was destroyed at Mr. Doyle's request. 30 days before he passed, he called me himself from his bed and asked me to void the amendment. I didn't ask why. I just filed the paperwork. He didn't want his will changed after all. I closed my eyes. The violins were still playing in the background. Thank you, Mr. Glazer. If you have documents with another witness signature, I'd advise you to take them to a different attorney and keep a copy of everything. He hung up. I put my phone in my pocket and turned around. Daniel looked up at me. Who was that? Your father's lawyer. He said your father revoked the codicil a month before he died. He signed nothing that gave M.A. Rotha ownership of this house. The document we have is not valid. Daniel stared at me. His mouth opened and closed. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to the coffee table, and picked up the stack of papers. He held them like they were made of glass. Then she forged it. She or someone. The paralegal didn't witness it. So either she signed the witness line herself, or she found someone else to do it. But the original codicil was destroyed. There's no legal claim. He set the papers down slowly, as if letting them go too fast might break something. I'm going to Tampa, he said. I'm going to get that video, and I'm going to look my sister in the eye and ask her what she thought she was doing. Take the papers with you, show them to her. If she tries to claim they're real, she'll have to explain why the witness signature doesn't match the original file. He nodded. He walked to the front door, then stopped, turned, and came back to me. What about you? I'll stay here with Becca. I'll call the police if anything else happens. But I don't think she's coming back tonight. She's hiding in Tampa with her friend, and she's going to stay there until she figures out her next move. Daniel put his hand on my arm. It was a brief touch, tentative, like he wasn't sure he was allowed. I never meant for this to happen. I know. I should have told you about the first conversation. When she moved in, I should have told you she said Dad promised her the house. You didn't believe her. I didn't want to. He dropped his hand. I wanted to think she was just struggling, that she'd get back on her feet and leave. I told myself if I didn't make it a problem, it wouldn't become one. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like an accusation, and he was already CRIing enough of those. He walked out the front door. I heard his keys. He heard it back out of the driveway. He heard it disappear down the street. I went upstairs. Becca was sitting on her bed, hugging the rabbit. The television flickering silently in the corner. She'd turned on the CR tune again, but she wasn't watching it. She was staring at the wall. Mommy, is T coming back? No, baby. Not too good. She said it flatly, without relief, just a simple statement of fact. I sat down on the bed beside her. You don't have to be red of her. She's not going to hurt you. I won't let her. Becca turned to me with those big gray eyes. But she said the house was hers. She said you and Daddy would have to go away, and I would have to go with her. That's not true. The house is ours. It was always ours. The papers she had were fake. Becca frowned. What's fake? It means not real. Like a pretend game. T was pretending, but it wasn't a nice game. And she's not going to play it anymore. She thought about that for a minute. Then she crawled into my lap and put her head against my shoulder. The rabbit dangled from her hand. Can I have macaroni for dinner? Sure. With the orange cheese. The orange cheese. She smiled a little. It was a weak smile, but it was there. I held her until she wiggled to get down, and then I went downstairs to make macaroni from the box in the pantry. The house was quiet. The grandfather clock kept ticking. The refrigerator hummed. I opened the cabinet and took down a pot, filled it with water, set it on the stove. While I waited for it to boil, I pulled out my phone and called Daniel. It rang 3 times and then he answered. His voice was distant, as if he was driving in heavy traffic. Hey, did you get there yet? Almost. Another 20 minutes. The lawyer said the original codicil is destroyed. That means whatever Mamorta has, it's not. Even if she shows you a video, it won't change what the official record says. I know, but I want to see it anyway. Why? He was quiet for a moment. The road noise crackled on the line. Because I need to understand why she did this. I need to hear her say it, not through papers or phone calls. Her. To me, in a room. I stirred the water with a wooden spoon. It was starting to bubble. I said. Call me when you get there. Okay. He hung up. I put the phone on the counter and poured the macaroni into the pot. The water splashed a little. I watched the elbows swirl and settle. And I thought about Daniel driving to Tampa. About Emma Rotha waiting in her friend's house with her video and her lies. About the documents on the coffee table that had no legal power but had caused so much damage anyway. Becca came into the kitchen CRIing her rabbit. She pulled out a chair and climbed onto it, kneeling so she could see the stove. Is it almost ready? Almost. She laid her rabbit flat on the table, smoothed its ear, and started whispering to it. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. She was safe and she was home. And for right now, that was enough. The macaroni boiled. I turned it off and drained it, and stirred in the cheese powder and butter and milk, just like the box said. I served it in her favorite bowl, the one with the stars around the rim, and watched her eat. She was hungry. She hadn't eaten since lunch. I sat across from her and drank a glass of water. My phone stayed DRK on the counter. At 8 o'clock, I put Becca to bed. I read her a story. The one about the bunny who lost his mother and found her again. She fell asleep halfway through. I closed the book and sat in the rocking chair by her window for a while, watching the street outside. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway at 11:15. I heard the door. He heard his footsteps in the hallway. He came into the living room. I was sitting on the couch, waiting. He held up his phone. She didn't have a video. What? She showed me a video from the day Dad signed the first document. The one before the codicil. The one he signed with the real lawyer, but she'd recorded it with a new voice over. making it sound like he was signing away the house. She thought I wouldn't notice the date stamp. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. She admitted it, he said. She admitted she forged the witness signature. She said she thought if she just made me believe it was real, I'd be too embarrassed to challenge her in court. She thought I'd rather give her the house than stay to fight. He sat down across from me, his face hollow. She's not coming back here, not tomorrow, not ever. I told her if she tries to contact Becca again, I'll file a restraining order. She agreed. I looked at his hands. They were empty, no papers, no phone. Did she apologize? He shook his head slowly. She said she was sorry it had to happen this way, but she didn't apologize for what she did. She thinks we owed her something. She always thought that. We sat in silence for a long time. The house was quiet. Becca was asleep. The grandfather clock ticked past midnight. Come to bed, I said. He followed me upstairs. I checked on Becca one more time. She was still asleep, rabbit tucked under her arm, and then went into our room. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed, still dressed, staring at nothing. He said, I'm going to call an attorney, a different one. I want to make sure everything we have is legal and that she can't try anything again. That's a good idea. He looked up at me. I sat down beside him. I know, I am too, but we're still here, and she's not. That's what matters. I turned off the light. I heard him take a breath and let it out slowly. Then he lay down and said nothing else. I lay awake for another hour, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Emma Rotha's face on the other end of that phone call, the flatness in her voice when she told my daughter to hang herself. I thought about the papers on the coffee table, the forged witness line, the destroyed codicil. And I thought about Becca in the next room, sleeping with her rabbit, dreaming of macaroni and pink roses and the green grass outside. In the morning, I would make breakfast. I would call the attorney. I would take down the garland of dried flowers Becca made last spring and help her make a new one. I would go back to work and finish that email and pretend the last few days hadn't turned my whole life sideways. But tonight, I just lay still and listened to Daniel breathe. The house was ours, it had always been ours. And that was the only truth that mattered. The attorney's office smelled like old paper and coffee. The kind of smell that made you think of wills and deeds, and everything that went wrong, when people didn't write things down clearly. I sat in the leather chair across from a woman named Patricia Hill, who had gray, streaked hair and reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of steady gaze that told you she'd seen worse than this. Daniel was beside me, his knee bouncing under the table. He'd been quiet all morning. We'd dropped Becca at a neighbor's house, and on the drive over he'd said exactly 3 sentences. I called the lawyer. She can see us at 10 and, I'm sorry. The last one he'd said about 6 times. Patricia spread the documents across her desk. The appraisal report, the forged witness page, the copy of the original codicil that Glazer's office had faxed over. She studied each one in silence, holding them up to the light like she was checking for something invisible. Your sister-in-law signed her own witness line, she said finally. That's not just irregular, that's fraud. If she presented this to a court, she'd be committing perjury. Daniel stopped bouncing his knee. So the document is worthless. Worthless legally, yes, but the damage isn't just legal, is it? Patricia looked at me. Your daughter was in that rage. The police report mentioned a rope. That's what concerns me more than the paperwork. I nodded. The police took the rope, they took photographs. But they didn't arrest her. Because she wasn't there when they arrived, and a 4-year-old's testimony, even with the recording, is hard to prosecute if the suspect doesn't admit intent. She set the papers down and folded her hands. What do you want to happen here? I can file for a restraining order. I can push for fraud charges, or I can write a letter to your sister-in-law, on firm letterhead, telling her that the document she claims to hold is invalid, and that any further attempts to claim ownership will result in a lawsuit she cannot win. Daniel looked at me. His eyes were tired. Letter, I said, start with the letter. See if she backs off. Patricia nodded. She pulled a legal pad toward her and wrote a few lines. I'll have it drafted this afternoon. In the meantime, keep copies of everything. Don't let her into your house. If she shows up, call the police before you open the door. We stood to leave. Daniel shook her hand, but I lingered by the desk. One more thing, I said. The recording I made. The one from the phone call. Can that be used as evidence? Patricia sat back. You recorded your daughter's call. After she called me, I used the phone's built-in record function to capture the last few seconds. I know that's not exactly the most reliable, but I heard what I heard. Florida is a 2-party consent state. You can't record someone without their knowledge in a private conversation. But because your daughter initiated the call, and because you were responding to a distress situation, there's some leeway. The district attorney would have to decide. Keep the file safe. Don't share it with anyone but me. I thanked her and walked out. Daniel was already in the hallway, leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone. I asked. Not from a Ratha. A text from your work. Your supervisor wants to know if you're coming in tomorrow. Tell her I'll be there. We drove home in silence. The radio played a station I didn't recognize, something soft with guitars. I watched the houses roll past, the identical lawns, the mailboxes with their black metal numbers. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always had. Yellow siding, the rusty mailbox, the oak tree, but I saw it differently now. I saw every window as a place someone could look out of. Every door as something that could be locked or forced open. Becca was at the neighbors until noon, so I had 2 hours of quiet. Daniel went into the kitchen and made himself a sandwich. I sat on the back porch and stared at the yard. The grass was still long, still unwatered. The swing set was still empty. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower started up. I went inside and called my sister. She lived 3 states away, had her own life, her own 2 kids. I hadn't told her any of this yet. The phone rang twice. She picked up with her usual breathless hello. You okay? You sound weird. I'm okay. I need to tell you something. I told her the whole thing. The phone call, the clothes in the yard, the arranged, the rope, the forged papers, the lawyer. When I finished, there was a long pause on her end. Let me get this straight, she said. Your husband's sister told your 4-year-old to hang herself, and your husband didn't know she'd forged the papers. He didn't know. Are you sure? I leaned against the kitchen counter. He's as stunned as I am. Stunned isn't the same as innocent. Cheer a lot. He let her move in. He let her stay. He didn't check the papers. He didn't tell you about the codicil. He didn't think it was real. Men never think things are real until they blow up in their faces. My sister sighed. What are you going to do? Stay here, fix the house, make sure Becca feels safe. And she's not coming back. You sound too calm. I'm not calm, I'm just tired. She understood. She always did. We talked for a few more minutes. About her kids, about the weather, about nothing important. When I hung up, I felt a little lighter. Daniel came in from the backyard. He was holding something in his hand, a small piece of plastic. I found this in the flower bed. He showed it to me. A hair clip. The kind with the little metal teeth. I recognized it. It belonged to Becca, from last spring, before she lost it. She probably dropped it outside last year. Just hasn't turned up until now. He nodded and put it on the counter. Then he stood there, not moving, his hands hanging at his sides. I was thinking, he said, what if I take the week off work, stay home with Becca? She's not going to want to go back to press school yet, and I don't want her to be alone. That's a good idea. And I'll fix the garage door. The lock on it is old. I should have fixed it months ago. We should both have done a lot of things. He looked at me. There was something in his face that I hadn't seen before. Not guilt, not shame, but something softer, a recognition of what we'd almost lost. I'll make dinner tonight, he said. You're a terrible cook. Then we'll order pizza. I almost laughed. Almost. The corner of my mouth twitched, and he saw, and he gave me the smallest smile in return. The morning passed slowly. I cleaned the kitchen, swept the living room, organized the papers on the coffee table. Patricia's office called to say they'd sent the letter by certified mail. Daniel worked on the garage door, his toolbox spread out on the driveway, the sun warming the concrete. At 11, I walked to the neighbor's house to pick up Becca. She was sitting on the porch, drawing with chalk on the concrete. Pink sun, a greenhouse, 3 stick figures holding hands. That's nice. Who's that? She pointed. That's you. That's Daddy. That's me. It's a new sun. The old one was too yellow. I knelt beside her. Do you want to come home now? She nodded and dropped the chalk. I gathered her things, her rabbit, her little backpack, the drawing she'd made earlier, and walked her back down the driveway. Daniel met us at the front door. His hands were smudged with grease. Becca looked at him moodily for a moment, then softened and let him pick her up. The garage door is fixed, he told her. It locks from the inside now. You can push a button and it clicks shut. Can I push the button? After lunch. She nodded, sat, and wiggled down to run into the living room. I watched her go. The pink clip Daniel had found now tucked into her hair, the rabbit trailing behind. We ate lunch at the kitchen table. Apple slices. Daniel had even bought the kind of chips Becca liked, the baked ones in the blue bag. She ate everything on her plate, asked for more, and then asked if she could go to her room and draw. Sure, sweetie, or she ran upstairs. Daniel Clay read the plates. I sat at the table and looked out the window at the backyard. The hour I spent on the porch after lunch was quiet. I sat in the old rocking chair and looked at the rosebushes my mother-in-law had planted years ago. They were wild now, untrimmed, but still blooming in pale pink clusters. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. "You win this round, but I'll never forget what you took from me." I read at the screen. My fingers were cold, even in the midday heat. I didn't recognize the number, but I didn't need to. It was Meme Ra's message, sent through a new account. I didn't respond. I locked the phone and put it in my pocket and went back inside. Daniel was in the living room. I handed him the phone. He read the message, and the color drained from his face. "She's still trying. She sent it from a new number. She knows we blocked her old one." He handed the phone back. "I'll call the lawyer again. Have her send a cease and desist." "Good." He made the call in the kitchen, his voice low and steady. I sat on the couch and listened to him speak, to the calm he was forcing into his words. When he hung up, he came back and sat beside me. "It's done. Patricia said the letter will be ready this afternoon. She'll send both the fraud letter and the cease and desist together." I leaned my head against his shoulder. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, arming the floor from upstairs. I could hear Becca humming. The tune was familiar, something she'd heard on the radio in the car. She was safe, the door was locked. That was what mattered. Daniel didn't move. Neither did I. The quiet wasn't perfect, but it was ours. 2 days passed before the silence broke. I went back to work, answered emails, sat through a meeting, where I nodded at all the right moments, and remembered none of it. Daniel stayed home with Becca, and every evening when I came back, the house looked a little more settled. The rage door lock replaced, the flower beds weeded, the porch steps swept clean. On the third morning, I woke to rain. It came down hard against the bedroom window. The kind of Florida downpour that turned gutters into rivers, and made everything outside look blurred and soft. Becca had already climbed into our bed sometime during the night, her rabbit wedged between us. She was still asleep, her mouth slightly open, her breathing slow and even. I slipped out from under the blanket and went downstairs. The kitchen was dark except for the glow of the microwave clock. I made coffee and stood at the window, watching the rain slant across the yard. The knock came at 7:30, not the doorbell, a knock, 3 sharp raps against the front door. My hand tightened around the coffee mug. I set it down and walked to the hallway. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could see a shape, small, hunched, holding something over her head against the rain. I unlocked the door and opened it. Meme Rada stood on the porch, soaked through. Her hair was plastered to her scalp, her blouse clinging to her shoulders. She held a plastic shopping bag over her head, useless now, dripping onto the welcome mat. Behind her, a taxi idled in the driveway, its wipers sweeping across the windshield. "I need to talk." Her voice was flat, without the sharp edge. I remembered. "The taxi's waiting. I'll be 5 minutes." I didn't step aside. I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway and looked at her. Her hollow eyes, the dark circles beneath them. The way her hands trembled slightly around the bag. "There's nothing to talk about. The lawyer sent you the letters." "I got them." She lowered the bag. Rain dripped from her chin. "That's why I'm here. I want to explain." "Explain what?" "The rope. The voice on my phone telling my daughter to die." Mame Ratha flinched. I saw it, a small muscle twitch near her jaw, but she didn't look away. "I was wrong," she said. "I knew it the minute you hung up on me that afternoon, but I'd already stay rotted, and I didn't know how to stop." I said nothing. I heard the stairs creak. Daniel coming down. Mame Radha's eyes flicked over my shoulder. She saw her brother, and something in her face shifted, a crack in the air more. "Danny, what are you doing here?" His voice was low. "The taxi's waiting." I just wanted to say it in person, not over the phone, not in a letter. She looked at me again, rain still running down her face. "I never meant to hurt Becca. I meant to scare you, both of you, so you'd leave, so I'd have the house. I thought if I made you afraid enough, you'd just go." "Threats aren't negotiations," I said. "You can't threaten a child and call it a strategy." "No." She shook her head, slow and deliberate. "You're right, I can't. I was angry and desperate and I did something unforgivable." She held up the plastic bag. "I brought something. It's not an excuse, but it's the truth." She reached into the bag and pulled out a slim folder, already damp at the edges. She held it out to me. I didn't take it. Daniel stepped around me and took it instead. He opened it and read at the contents. His face didn't change, but I saw his shoulders drop a fraction. "I asked," he said, quietly, "from our father, dated 2 weeks before he died. It's addressed to Meme Ra." I took the folder from his hands. The letter was written in the same shaky hand, I remembered from the other note, the one his mother had shown me, but this one was longer, and the handwriting was worse. The letters trailed off at the ends of words, as if his hand had gotten too tired to finish. It began, I know you're angry, you've always been angry, ever since you were little, but this time you have a reason. I made a mistake. I promised you things I couldn't deliver. The house belongs to Daniel and Cheche Rot. I made that clear when I signed the will. But I also told you could stay here as long as you needed. That was my fault. I gave you hope I shouldn't have. I read on. The letter went on to apologize, to explain that his health was failing, and he didn't have the energy to fix what he'd broken. It ended with a plea. Let them have the house, find your own way, you're strong enough, I've always known that. I handed the folder back to Emma Rotha. She took it, but her hands were shaking so much the papers rustled. He gave that to me 3 days before he died, she said. He gave it to me in the hospital. He told me to read it when I got home. I didn't. I threw it in a drawer and I pretended it didn't exist. I pretended he'd never said those things. That he'd actually meant to leave me the house. I made up my own story. Daniel stepped forward. He didn't touch her, but he stood close, his voice be above a whisper. Why are you showing us this now? Because I'm tired, she said. I'm tired of lying to myself. I'm tired of being that person. The letters your lawyer sent, they made me realize this is real. I'm not going to win. I can't win. I don't even want to win anymore. She looked at me. Her eyes were red from the rain, or maybe from something else. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I wanted to say it to your face. Not over the phone, not in a letter, here, in the rain, like I deserved. I looked past her. The taxi was still there. The driver watching through the windshield, with the vague patience of someone paid by the minute. Rain drummed on the roof. Where will you go? I asked. I have a friend in Tampa. She's letting me stay until I figure things out. I got an interview next week, a receptionist job at a dental office. It's not much, but it's something. Daniel rubbed his face with his palm. What about the furniture? You left a lot of things in your room. Send me a list. I'll pick it up later. She paused, something flickering behind her eyes. I don't see a just don't throw it out on the lawn. Not like I did to Becca's clothes. She said it without bitterness, just a flat statement, a mirror held up to her own actions. I saw Daniel take the umbrella from the stand. I said, it's still raining. Amatha looked at me. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she reached past me and took the red umbrella, the one I used for grocery trips, the one with the broken clasp. She opened it and stepped off the porch, down onto the wet walkway. She turned back once, at the bottom of the steps. Tell Becca I'm sorry. I won't come near her again, but tell her, if you think it's okay, tell her I'm sorry. I nodded. She walked to the taxi and got in. The door closed, the engine revved, and the car pulled away, its taillights vanishing through the rain. Daniel shut the front door. He leaned against it, his head tipped back. Do you think she meant it? I don't know. I walked to the kitchen, picked up my cold coffee, and poured it down the sink. But she showed us the letter. She came here in the rain. She didn't try to lie or be gain or threaten. Doesn't make what she did okay. No, it doesn't, but it changes the shape of things. I turned to face him. She's not coming back. That's what matters. Becca called down from upstairs. Mummy, who was at the door? I walked to the bottom of the stairs. No one just someone who got lost in the rain. She accepted that. I heard her feet pad back across the floor, back to the bed she'd left, back to the rabbit and the pillows. Daniel came to stand beside me. The rain had slowed. The drumming softened to a patter. The yard was drenched, puddles everywhere. But the sun was still rotting to break through the gray on the horizon. We should paint the porch, he said. The paint's peeling. Has been for years. Okay. And I'll fix the clasp on your umbrella. Buy a new one. That one's too old. He nodded. We stood there, in the hallway, the rain fading outside. As taxi was gone, the letter was in her hands. The house was still ours. I went upstairs to check on Becca. She was sitting up in bed now, drawing on a piece of scrap paper with a red crayon. She looked up when I came in. Mommy, the rain is stopping. It is. Can we go outside? In a little while, when it's dry enough. She nodded and went back to her drawing. I sat on the edge of her bed and watched her work. She was drawing a garden, pink flowers, a green bush, a blue sky with a yellow sun. I let myself breathe. The rain stopped by noon, and the sun came out hard and bright, steaming the wet pavement and making the grass smell like cut green things. Becca spent the afternoon in the backyard, her bare feet sinking into the mud, drawing with chalk on the flagstones until her hands were white with dust. I sat on the porch steps and watched her, a cup of tea cooling beside me. The red umbrella from the hallway now propped in the corner to dry. Daniel went to the Arade store and came back with a can of paint the color of cream. He set it on the front porch and spent an hour scraping the old peeling flakes off the wood. The sound of the scraper rhythmic and steady. I didn't offer to help, neither of us spoke much, but the silence wasn't the heavy kind. It was the kind that let you think. The letter Ma Radha had brought stayed on the kitchen counter for the rest of the day. I read it twice more, holding it by the edges, careful not to smudge the ink. The words didn't change, they were still my father-in-law's words, shaky and the apology of a dying man who knew he'd made promises he couldn't keep. I folded it and put it in the drawer with the others. The one Daniel's mother had given me. The one with the family photograph. That night, after Becca was asleep, Daniel sat on the edge of our bed with his phone in his hands. His thumbs hovered over the screen. I want to call my mother, he said. Tell her everything, not just what Mayrava did, but what she showed us, the letter. Ouch. I think she deserves to know. Tomorrow, I said. It's late. He put the phone down and lay back against the pillows. The ceiling fan clicked its slow revolution overhead. She came back, he said, almost to himself. She got in a taxi in the rain and she came back and she told the truth. After everything, I didn't think she had it in her. I turned on my side to face him. People change, or they don't. She might be changing, or she might just be scared of what happens next. Which one do you think it is? I don't know. I reached over and turned off the lamp. But it doesn't matter, as long as she stays away. He didn't answer. In the DRKA him exhale, slow and long. The next morning, Daniel called his mother. I heard him in the kitchen, his voice low and careful, explaining. There were long pauses. The kind where the person on the other end was processing. He said yes, and no, I know, and then. Finally, she gave us the letter Dad wrote her. The real one. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. He looked up at me, his eyes asking a question. I nodded. You should come see it. He said into the phone. Today if you can. It's important. He hung up and set the phone on the counter. She's coming at 2. She wants to see the letter. Good. I made breakfast. Becca came down in her pajamas, her hair a tangle of sleep, and climbed into her chair. She ate her cereal with the focus of someone who hadn't thought about anything else all morning. Daniel sat across from her, watching her with an expression I couldn't quite read. By the time his mother arrived, the house was clean. I'd straightened the living room, put the papers away, made sure the kitchen counters were wiped down. Daniel's mother walked through the front door with her handbag and her walking stick, and she looked around the room with the same full, assessing gaze she'd used the last time she'd come. Ma Retha's letter was on the coffee table. Daniel's mother sat down heavily in the Aram chair, her stick propped against the side. She picked up the letter and held it at arm's length, reading the shaky handwriting in silence. When she finished, she folded the letter and set it on her lap. She didn't speak for a long time. Your father, she said finally, was a good man. He made mistakes, but he was good. He wrote this to make peace, not to give her permission. I nodded. That's how I read it. She looked at Daniel. You said she brought this herself. Yes, ma'am, and you believe her apology was real. He hesitated. I think she was scared enough to be honest. That's not the same as real, but it's close. His mother tapped her fingers on the arm of the chair, a soft rhythmic beat. I've known her longer than you have, longer than anyone. She's always been able to say the right thing when she's cornered. That doesn't mean she means it. She paused. But it doesn't mean she doesn't, either. She handed the letter back to me. Keep this safe. Don't give it to her again. If she's telling the truth, she'll accept that. If she's not, she'll come back for it. I took the letter and put it back in the drawer, alongside the others. Daniel's mother stayed for dinner. She sat at the table with us, her hands folded around a glass of water, and she told stories about Daniel and Ma Ratha when they were children. She told one about Mamrath at 8, climbing onto the roof to rescue a cat and getting stuck, and Daniel at 12, climbing up after her with a rope he'd found in the garage. Your father was so mad, she said, laughing a little, but he was also proud. He said that was the first time he'd ever seen you two work together. Daniel smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached his eyes. Becca listened to the story with her chin in her hands, her eyes wide. Did T get the cat? She did, his mother said. And she never climbed on a roof again. She said one time was enough. I watched Becca process that. I saw her filing it away. This new piece of information about a woman she'd only known as the Skie Raiwan in the yellow house. I didn't know if it would change anything, but I was glad she heard it. After dinner, Daniel's mother stood and put on her coat. She kissed Becca on the forehead, shook my hand the way she always did. Firm and quick. and walked out the front door with her walking stick and her handbag and her quiet presence. Daniel and I stood on the porch and watched her car pull out of the driveway. She's not going to forgive Amarada overnight, he said. But she's not going to cut her off either. That's just not how she works. At least she came, I said. She could have stayed away. She didn't. He put his arm around my shoulders. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the first time in weeks that he'd touched me without tension in his hand. We went inside and locked the door. That night, I sat in Becca's room while she fell asleep. She was holding her rabbit, her eyes already heavy. I brushed the hair off her forehead. Mommy, does T still hate me? No baby, she doesn't hate you. She made a mistake. But she's not going to come back. But does she hate you? I thought about the answer. I thought about Amarita in the rain, her hand shaking, the taxi waiting in the driveway. I don't know, I said. But I don't need her to love me. I just need her to leave us alone. Becca nodded slowly, her eyes closing. Okay, she drifted off. I sat there a little longer, listening to her breathe, the soft huff of air through her parted lips. The room was quiet, filled with the muted light of the nightlight I'd plugged in after she'd had her night res. I went to bed. Daniel was already asleep, his arm thrown across his pillow, his face relaxed in the way it only got when he was past exhaustion. I lay down and stared at the ceiling, the same ceiling I'd stared at a dozen nights before. But this time the cracks didn't look like threats anymore. They looked like cracks in an old house, nothing more. The rest of the week passed in a routine that felt almost normal. I went to work. Daniel stayed home and painted the porch. Becca played in the yard, her chalk drawings now covering half the flagstones. No calls came from Amarita, no letters arrived on Saturday. We took Becca to the park. She ran ahead of us, her pink sneakers flashing across the grass. And she climbed onto the swings before we'd even reached the bench. Daniel pushed her, and I sat and watched, the sun muarm on my shoulders. Dauke, higher, her laugh ride across the playground. Other parents were scattered around, some pushing strollers, some talking on phones, everyone doing what we were doing. Living. I saw the familiar car pulling into the parking lot before I recognized it, a small sedan, the color of dust, with a dent on the passenger door. It stopped near the entrance, and the door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was thinner than before. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain white shirt, and she looked smaller than I remembered. Smaller in a way that wasn't just the distance between us. Daniel turned, following my gaze. His hand stopped on the swing chain. I'll talk to her, he said. I stood up. I will. I walked across the grass toward the parking lot. Amarita saw me coming and stopped, her hands at her sides, her face unreadable. The wind blew her hair across her eyes, and she tucked it back. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said. I was just driving. I saw you in the park. I wanted to see if Becca was okay. She's fine. She's playing. Artha nodded. She looked past me toward the swings, where Daniel had stared pushing again. She looks happy. She is. I'm leaving Tampa next week, going north. My friend has a cousin in Virginia who needs a live-in assistant. It's not much, but it's something. Good. Mirasa turned to look at me. I know you don't believe me. You don't have to. But I'm not going to try anything again. I don't have it in me anymore. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, the wind between us. She got back in her car, started the engine and drove away. I watched until the dust settled. Then I walked back to the swings and sat down on the bench. Daniel looked at me. What did she say? She's leaving, going north. Did you believe her? I watched Becca on the swing, her arms stretched out, her face bright with joy. I'm starting to, I said. Amarita left for Virginia on a Tuesday. I knew because Daniel's mother called to tell us, her voice flat and matter of fact, like she was reporting the weather. She called me from the road, said she'd be there by evening. Told me to tell you she didn't expect anything from anyone. I thanked her and hung up. The news sat in my chest for the rest of the day, not heavy but present. Like a bruise that had faded to yellow but still ached when you pressed on it. Daniel came home from work with a bag of groceries and a small potted plant, a fern with delicate fronds that curled at the edges. He set it on the kitchen windowsill. Becca said she wanted something green in the house. Something that wasn't dead. I touched one of the fronds. It was soft, almost feathery. It's nice. He stood beside me and looked out the window. The backyard had started to look different now. The grass cut, the rose bushes trimmed back, a new bird feeder hanging from the oak tree. Small changes, but they added up. I talked to the lawyer again today, he said. She said we should file the final papers, the ones that officially close out the dispute. Root is not contesting anything anymore. It's just paperwork now. When do we sign? Next week. She'll send the documents over. I nodded. The fern caught the afternoon light, casting a small shadow on the sill. We drove to the Arabi store and bought paint for the upstairs bathroom, a pale blue that Becca had picked from a strip of samples. She held the strip against the wall in the store, her brow furrowed in concentration, and Dikla read it perfect. Daniel ca ride the gallon can to the checkout, and I ride Becca on my shoulders, her little hands gripping my hair. We painted the bathroom on Sunday. Becca had her own brush, a small one that Daniel had trimmed down so it fit her hand, and she painted the bottom 2 feet of wall in strokes that overlapped and dripped, and made her giggle. Her overalls were speckled with blue by the time we finished, and her hair had a small streak of it near her AR. Mummy, look. She pointed to the wall. I did that I see it, baby. It's beautiful. She beamed and ran off to wash her hands, leaving blue footprints on the drop cloth. Daniel knelt beside me and wiped a smear of paint off his glasses. She's doing better, he said. She doesn't ask about Anaratha anymore. Neither do I. He looked at me, and something passed between us, not words, but the quiet understanding that we'd both moved into a different room of the same house. The week passed, work was work, the same emails and meetings and fluorescent lights, but I noticed things I hadn't before. The way the sun came through the office blinds at 3 o'clock, the sound of Linda's laugh from the next cubicle. Ordinary pleasures of a day that didn't include a crisis. On Friday eve, I came home to find Becca sitting at the kitchen table, with a stack of construction paper, and a pair of safety scissors. She was cutting out shapes, circles and squares and lopsided triangles, and arranging them on the table in a pattern I didn't recognize. What are you making, Gerardin? She held up a circle. This is the sun, and this is the fence. She pointed to a row of squares. And this is our house. She set a rectangle in the center of the table, with a smaller rectangle beside it. That's a good Giardin. Where are the flowers? She frowned, thinking, I don't have pink paper. Use red. The roses in the backyard are reread sometimes. She considered this and nodded, then went back to her cutting. I watched her for a while, then went upstairs to change. Daniel was in the bedroom, standing in front of the open closet. He was holding a suit jacket, the one he wore for interviews and funerals, the one that had hung untouched for years. Where are you going? I asked. I'm not going anywhere. He held the jacket up. I was just thinking about what I have that could be worth something. For the lawyer's fees, the new locks, the paint. I thought maybe I'd sell it. I walked over and took the jacket from him. It was good wool de gray, perfectly tailored. It had cost more than we should have spent back when we thought that kind of thing mattered. I said, well, figure out the money. I'll pick up some extra shifts. You can do the same. We don't need to sell your clothes. He put the jacket back in the closet and closed the door. I don't want to owe anyone anything again. Neither do I. But this is different. This is us, paying for our own things. Not a mayor, not your mother, just us. He sat on the bed and rubbed his face with both hands. I sat beside. We're going to be fine, I said. He looked at me. How do you know? Because we have a fern on the windowsill and a blue bathroom and a daughter who makes paper Rodins. That's not nothing. He almost smiled. That's not a plan. It's a stiarity. That night, after Becca was asleep, we sat on the back porch. The air had CO-lead, the humidity dropping to something almost comfortable. Crickets chirped in the grass. The bird feeder swayed gently in the breeze. I called my mother again this afternoon, Daniel said. She wants to come for Thanksgiving. She said she'd bring the turkey. Your mother's turkey is dry. I know, but she makes good gravy. I leaned back in my chair. Becca would love to see her. Are you sure? I'm sure. She's been good to us. He nodded, and we sat in the quiet for a while longer. The moon rose over the oak tree, pale and round, lighting the yard in silver. The next morning, I found Becca in the kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear. Her face was serious, her small hand gripping the receiver. She was talking in a low, deliberate voice. No, I have a Garodin now. It's made of paper. I can make you one if you want. I stopped in the doorway. She hadn't heard me come in. Okay, bye. She hung up and turned around, and her face broke into a smile. Mommy, I talked to Grandma. She said she's coming for Thanksgiving. That's great, baby. I walked to the table and sat down. Who called her? You did. Grandma called. She said she wanted to talk to me. She asked if I was okay. I told her about the Girodin. I pulled her onto my lap. That was a good thing to do. She asked about tea. Becca said, her voice dropping. I told her tea went away. She said that was probably for the best. I held her a little tighter. Grandma's right. It was. Becca wiggled down and ran off to finish her garden. I sat at the table and read at the phone, the receiver still wooey arm from her hand. I thought about Daniel's mother calling, about Becca answering, about the quiet thread of connection that was still there, even after everything. The rest of the day passed in pieces. Daniel worked on the porch, sanding the last of the peeling paint. I cleaned the kitchen and made a grocery list for the week. Becca finished her paper rodden and taped it to the refrigerator, right at eye level. In the afternoon, we walked to the PAR. Becca ran ahead, her hair flying, her voice calling out to no one in PA article R. Daniel walked beside me, his hand in his pocket, his pace easy. Thanksgiving, he said. We haven't had a real one in years. We had one last year. That wasn't real. Nitterworth, everyone was walking on eggshells. He was right, it had been stiff, full of silences. The kind of meal where you counted the minutes until you could leave the table. I hadn't realized how much I'd dreaded it until I remembered it now. This year will be different, I said. Because Ma Roth is gone. Because we're not pretending anymore. He stopped walking and turned to me. The parquet was quiet, the swings empty, the slide glinting in the sun. Becca was across the grass, talking to a dog through the fence. Thank you, he said. For what? For staying, for not leaving, for listening to me even when I didn't have anything good to say. I took his hand. His fingers were warm, calloused from the sandpaper. Ride you, I said. That wasn't a mistake. He squeezed my hand. And we walked the rest of the way to the swings. Becca came running back, her face flushed, and she climbed onto the swing and demanded to be pushed. Daniel pushed her, and I watched them, the two of them in the afternoon light. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not hope exactly, not peace, something closer to steadiness. The sun dipped toward the tree line. We stayed until the light turned gold, then walked home together. The house was waiting for us, ordinary and unchanged, and for the first time in a long time, that was exactly what I wanted. Thanksgiving morning came in gray and cool. The kind of Florida winter day that didn't know whether to rain or shine. I woke Eri and lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the house settle around me. Becca was still asleep. Daniel's side of the bed was empty, but I could hear him moving around in the kitchen below. I pulled on a sweater and went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like onions and celery, the turkey already in the oven. Daniel stood at the counter, chopping carrots with the focus of someone who'd never quite run to cook but was determined to try. Your mother's not going to eat those, I said, pointing at the carrots. She likes them whole. He stopped mid-slice. She told me to chop them. She told you to chop them so you'd feel useful. She'll still complain. He laughed, a short, surprised sound, and set the knife down. Then I'll put them in the stuffing. She can pick them out. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the table. The paper rodden Becca had made weeks ago was still on the refrigerator. The edges curled now. The red paper faded to pink. I stared at it while I drank, the ordinary side of it settling something in my chest. Daniel's mother arrived at 11, her car packed with more food than we could possibly eat. 2 pies, a casserole dish, a bag of rolls, and a jar of cranberry sauce that she'd made herself. She carried everything in with her walking stick hooked over one arm, refusing help until she'd set the last dish on the counter. I brought the gravy, she said, the real kind. Not that stuff from a jar, thank you, I said, and meant it. She looked around the kitchen. The new blue paint on the bathroom was visible through the open door. The fern on the windowsill had grown, its fronds reaching toward the light. The floor was clean, the counters wiped. The table set with the good plates we'd received as a wedding gift. Place looks different, she said. Looks like a home. It always was a home, I said. We just forgot for a while. She nodded, a short, and busied herself with the pies. The day unfolded slowly. Becca helped set the table, counting plates and forks with the serious expression of someone doing important work. She insisted on putting a napkin at every place, even the empty chair that would have been Ma Ross's. And I didn't say anything when she added it. Daniel carved the turkey with more confidence than skill, and his mother stood beside him, offering unsolicited advice in a voice that was almost arm. We sat down at 2 o'clock. The table was crowded with bowls and platters, the turkey steaming in the center. The gravy boat passed from hand to hand. Becca sat at the end, her feet dangling, her plate piled with everything she'd been allowed to choose. Daniel's mother said grace. It was a short one, the kind she'd said 1,000 times before. But she added something at the end that I hadn't expected. Thank you for bringing us back to this table, and thank you for the grace to let go of what we can't see. I opened my eyes. She was looking at me, and her gaze was steady. I nodded, and we ate. The conversation was easy, the way it sometimes is when you've been through the hardparts and come out the other side. She talked about her garden, about a neighbor who'd just had a baby, About the book club she'd joined at the senior center. Daniel talked about his work, the new project he'd been assigned, the colleague who made terrible coffee. I talked about Becca's preschool, about the drawings she'd brought home, about the small and ordinary texture of our days. Becca herself contributed random observations, the dog she'd seen at the park, the color of the sky that morning, the fact that she'd decided she wanted to be a butterfly when she grew up. Everyone laughed and she beamed, and the afternoon stretched out warm and full. After the plates were clear red and the pies were cut, Daniel's mother sat in the armchair with her coffee, and her walking stick propped beside her. Becca curled up on the carpet near her feet, coloring in a new book. I sat on the couch with a second cup of coffee, and Daniel sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee. His mother said, "I have something for you." She reached into the handbag at her feet and pulled out a small envelope. It was plain, the flap sealed with a strip of tape. I took, "What is it?" "Open it." I pulled the tape loose and slid out a single sheet of paper. It was a bank check, made out to me, for a sum that made me blink. "I can't take this, you can, and you will." She set her coffee down. "That's what I would have spent on a lawyer if I'd fought Ritha. But I didn't fight her. And I don't need the money. You can use it for the house, the roof, the porch, whatever needs doing." Daniel leaned over and looked at the check, his hand tightened on my knee. "Mom, that's too much." "It's not too much, it's what family does." She fixed her gaze on me. "When it would have been easier to leave, you stayed. That means something." I folded the check and put it back in the envelope. "Thank you, I'll use it for the roof." "Good." She picked her coffee up again and took a sip, as if the matter was settled, and it was. That evening, after his mother had left, after the leftovers were packed and the dishes were washed, Daniel and I sat on the back porch. The air had turned cool, and I'd wrapped myself in a blanket. Becca was in bed, worn out from the day, her rabbit tucked under her arm. Daniel was quiet for a long time, then he reached over and took my hand. "This is the first holiday in years where I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong." "Me neither." "The roof thing. I'll start on it next weekend. I'll call the roofer on Monday, get an estimate." He squeezed my hand. "Do you think she's okay?" "Mama, I mean, Virginia, the new job." "All of it." I thought about her in the rain, the taxi, the letter. "I think she's trying. That's all any of us can do." He nodded, and we sat in the DR, the crickets chirping, the moon rising above the oak tree. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Becca's feet padding down the hallway. She came into our room, rabbit in hand, and climbed into bed between us. She tucked herself under the blanket with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 100 times. "Mummy, is Grandma coming again for Christmas?" "Maybe." "Yes, she has good cookies." Daniel rolled over, still half asleep. "I'll buy extra flour." Becca giggled and snuggled deeper into the pillow. I lay, her small growth against my side, Daniel's hand resting on my ear. And I watched the morning light creep across the ceiling. The house was quiet, the roof needed work, the porch needed another coat of paint, the yard needed a new sprinkler. There were bills to pay and groceries to buy and 100 small tasks waiting for attention, but none of it felt urgent. None of it felt like a threat. I got up when Becca started complaining of hunger. I made the kind with the blueberries she liked, and we ate together at the table. Daniel came down in his bathrobe, his hair sticking up, and he sat across from us with his coffee and his quiet smile. After breakfast we went outside. The morning was bright, the air clean from the previous day's gray. Becca ran to the swings, and Daniel pushed her. I stood at the edge of the yard, looking at the house. The yellow siding was faded, the mailbox still leaned to one side. The oak tree dropped its acorns in a steady patter on the roof, but the curtains were open, and the fern was green in the window, and the door was unlocked. I walked back to the porch and sat on the steps. Daniel came and sat beside me, Becca still swinging behind us, her voice calling out in a tuneless song. "You know," he said, "when I was a kid, I thought this house was the biggest thing in the world. Then I grew up and saw it was just a house. Now I'm not so sure." "Me neither." Becca jumped off the swing and ran toward us, her hands out, her face bright. I caught her and pulled her onto my lap. And she settled there like she'd always been there, like she always would be. The sun climbed higher, the day stretched out ahead, ordinary and full, and I sat on the steps of my house, with my husband and my daughter, and I didn't want anything else.